Hello everyone, and I'm here to talk to you about some valuable lessons of leadership. Leadership is something that we have been talking about in the previous videos. You must have seen a number of interviews, and through that, a number of lessons to basics of leadership have been revealed. So we've had so far a pragmatic, a philosophical approach to leadership. We have a long way to go. My dear friends, leadership is something that is in trend. Leadership to leadership is something that we need to understand in this century. I was just hearing a speech of Abdul Kalam yesterday, and in that he gave a long message to the students. If you can recall, one of his speeches talked about the oath that each student must take. If we analyze that speech, we come to know that Abdul Kalam has blessed us with an oath. You know what that oath is? It is all related to environment. He says, I will solve my problems with science and technology. Now, when the term science and technology is used by him here, it just doesn't mean being a scientist and solving. When I was listening to it, I was reminded of the fact that even a leader is basically a social scientist. Don't you think so? I'm sure a number will agree. In fact, all of you would agree. Friends, this particular leadership and this shift in thinking pattern is very important, and that is what we need to develop in the youngsters, in the oldsters, and in every one of us. Coining new terms, coining new ways of solving problems is something that the generation is looking at. Remember, the problems that we had is very different from the problems which our generations are, the next generation is having, and the future generation will have, and the ones which our parents have had. What does this mean now? I'm sure I've confused you a bit. This means that each generation has a different type of problem. Based on that problem, we try to generalize a solution, and then we try to come to a conclusion. And then that conclusion is finalized for some time, but later it has to be revamped, rejuvenated, relooked at, learned, unlearned, and then a new thing is discovered. Leadership is something that needs to be discovered right now. The time is that every leader starts thinking like a social scientist. This means that the leader should have the responsibility of 1, making a social change, 2, having micro plannings at simple level. Let's take an example. When the Egyptian civilization was being studied by archaeologists and scientists, they tried to do different experiments. And one of the experiments they did was how the strong stones were molded into structures. During the experiments, they tried a number of things. They analyzed, they interpreted, they concluded. While doing so, they realized that all their methods failed. Suddenly, they saw a specimen of coal, and they started testing the stones with heat. Once the stones were heated, they became easy to work upon. And then it was a discovery that the ancient Egyptians used to pile up all the stones, incinerate it, burn it, and then they would work on it so that it becomes easier. Now, this is something that leaders have to adapt. Micro level planning. Simple things, but gives you big results. There is a philosophy that talks of ABS, that is Awakening Best Self. Awakening Best Self is something that Robin Sharma has talked about in his book. Now, Awakening Best Self basically means planning at such small levels that everything leads to awakening within you. There is a spark. That spark leads to ideas, that rolls to theories, solutions, and so on. It said, what is a leader? A leader who does not work with a heart. A leader with a mind is not good. A leader with a heart is not good. But a leader with a combination of a heart and mind is good. Now, this is what we need to adapt and inculcate in each of our practices. For example, you've got a person in your firm who is not doing well. Are you concerned about just the performance or what has led to the performance? If your concern is why and what has led to the performance decline, then you are a leader with a mind and a heart. And this is exactly what we need to build. Second, networking. Networking is one of the most important parameters that we need to understand. Each leader is like a magnet. The leader will attract strong networking connections in such a way that the entire work that is in projection or is being projected has a snowball effect. A very common known fact is that when a snow lump begins to roll down the mountains, it gradually rolls down, gathering a lot of snow. And this accumulates into one big ball, which we refer to as snowball. Science has revealed the snowball philosophy towards leadership. Science tells us that when we have strong networking, when the snowballs network, when they connect in a similar manner, when social scientists, when leaders connect with a number of similar thinking minds, a big change takes place. Social changes are example of big changes. Colonial rule, fighting it out, was an example of networking. People came together, they stood against it, and hence they got freedom. A number of countries got freedom. Now, what is this? This is nothing but leadership. And that is what is one of the parameters that we need to drill in our kids today. Let's talk about the next important segment of leadership. That is facing our fears. It is said, what is a leader if the leader does not have a fear and has not overcome it? Now, fear is something that is inherent to all of us. We fear something. That fear could be fear of losing a loved one, fear of losing a good team member, fear of losing during a competition, and so on. Fear that your product would fail. Every leader needs to fight this segment of fear. Social scientists have tried and tested a number of ways to overcome fear. And that is what leaders need to do. 1, when you have a fear, talk about it. 2, it is very important to examine your fear. 3, it is important that you educate yourself about that fear, how to solve that fear, what others have done to solve that particular fear. 4, practice the fear. That means we need to practice whatever we fear. That is what leadership is all about. Leadership is facing fears, coming out of it, micro planning, getting big results that are at macro level, networking in such a strong way that it has a snowball effect, trying, testing, and producing a social change that is long-lasting and that is sustainable. So let's be into this drive of leadership.